Welcome to this final podcast. In this podcast, I will talk about referencing. This is a vital skill in academic writing, and often I find that students lack the ability to reference and cite correctly. And as always, a small disclaimer, this is my view on things. Others, especially academics from other fields, might have other views. So see this as one perspective and be critical. However, in relation to referencing, there is not the same freedom as with, for instance, how to write an introduction or conclusion. You have to do it, and you have to do it the right way. While there are general guidelines of when you have to reference, the exact reference syntax differs a lot depending on which scholarly field that you are in and which journal you're writing to, and so on. I will try in this podcast to give you a sense of the guidelines for referencing correctly, but the first thing that you need to do when writing a paper is to check out exactly what format or standard the particular journal uses as the house reference style. Normally, information on the reference style can be found on the journal webpage. So in this example that I show here, I go into the Journal of Urban Design. I find the information for authors, and here I can find information about which reference style that the Journal of Urban Design uses. And normally when you have to write to a particular journal, you have to use that style. If you don't use it, they will dismiss the paper. At Aalborg University, we normally use the Harvard referencing style. So all project reports that are produced at Architecture Design needs to be formatted in the Harvard style. You can find more information about the Harvard referencing style convention at this webpage. So why is referencing important? Generally, it is seen as a part of knowing how to write academically, a key skill in good academic practice, and a cornerstone of academic writing. But the main reason why referencing is important, and you might have guessed this, is to rightfully be able to give credit to work that is not your own. If you don't, you are opening yourself to the worst possible accusation in academia: plagiarism. This is the worst that you can do, and I'm not overstating when I say that this has ruined careers and professional lives. We all know the story of the Danish Secretary of Science and Education, Esben Lunde Larsen, who was accused of plagiarism in his PhD dissertation, but later acquitted. However, his reputation suffered greatly. Often, of course, plagiarism is not intentionally done and happens due to a lack of referencing or referencing correctly. If giving credit and avoiding plagiarism is the primary motivation for referencing, then the secondary is providing information. Referencing allows the reader to follow up on the original work if they wish to and see how dated or recent a source is. Also, referencing is a kind of signposting. It shows connections to others' works, ideas, theories, results, projects, and so on, and how the particular piece of writing that you're doing is part of this existing web of knowledge. Referencing is therefore also a way of validating and strengthening your arguments, claims, ideas, results, analysis, as your statements are not free-floating things, but based upon the work of others. It is therefore part of enabling the reader to assess the quality of the writing as a piece of academic work. Okay, let's talk about when and how to reference. There are some rules that you can look to. Firstly, you must provide reference of everything that is not your own you use in the text. When in doubt, put in a reference. Better to have one too many. You cannot have a quote or a paraphrase from a source without a clear reference. So this includes a page number. It's not enough just to reference um, the whole source. If you make any changes in a quote, so this could be a translation, an addition, or correct spelling, you must always show exactly what you have changed. And the exact syntax for doing so can be found in the reference style description. And don't take for granted that the reader know about a particular concept, or idea, method, or project. Always provide precise information of the original source. And finally, it is the author's responsibility to know about referencing. It's expected in academic literature. If you haven't referenced correctly, it might impact the assessment of your paper, or, for example, a project report that you do when doing a semester project here at the university. So it is worthwhile to spend a bit of time on referencing correctly. Always reference to the best of your knowledge, well knowing that you can't know everything and everyone, and provide the most precise location of information as possible. So certain pages, time, places, conferences, and so on. The more accurate, the better. Sometimes it is good enough to simply reference a book or paper, but often you also need to show where in the book or paper the particular thing that you're pointing to is. So you do that by indicating the particular page or page range. And a particular journal might have specific rules of referencing. So a particular convention or style or an amount how much you should reference. A good advice is to look at other papers from that journal and see how they have done it, both in terms of syntax but also in terms of how much they reference. Referencing consists of two elements. So first, what is called in-text citation, and then second, the bibliography or reference list. So I'll just briefly show you what these two covers. So in-text citation is when referencing inside the actual text. So for example, if we look at this text, this is an example of an in-text citation. For the reader to find out exactly what source is used, he or she will go to the bibliography or reference list at the end of the paper. He has found all information on the source. So, for example, if we look again at the reference that we just reviewed, and we wanted to know exactly where that came from, we might look in the reference list in the end of the paper, and we find it here. And to reference correctly, you have to provide info on both the in-text citation and your bibliography. This means, of course, both the information needs to be right, so the author, the year, the publication name, and so on. But you also need the right syntax. So for the right syntax, you might consider looking at the reference style guide. And there are lots of different syntax. So depending on what source or type of source that it is that you are referencing, it could be a journal paper, a chapter, a book, electronic media, a newspaper article, or a lecture. The syntax is different. So as you see, there is quite a lot of information that needs to be present when referencing. So it's a good idea to write down this information and do proper referencing when writing the paper. It is very tiresome and often difficult to retrace the right references and sources and information afterwards. Okay, so let's finish off this podcast with two exercises. First, take a look at other publications and try to get a sense of when and where they reference. And then secondly, read a fellow student's text with a critical eye and give feedback on where references. So this concludes this podcast. Thank you for listening. And this podcast is in fact the last in the series. So hopefully you got some valuable insights that will help you write your own papers. And of course, if you want to know more, feel free to look at the material in this course. But also there's a ton of literature on the web. And finally, I just want to say that paper writing isn't, of course, an exact science. There are always many ways of doing it. Although, as we have reviewed in this series, there are definitely some things that need to be done in certain ways. But I think the most important thing in this paper writing course is that you actually get started on the writing, because it is in the writing that the paper is developed. And then secondly, use each other, show each other your work and be each other's critical friends. So that's it. Happy writing. See you around.